Now time for a look at the biggest news in the business world today with Kate Moody. Hello there. You're once again looking at this long-awaited trade truce we're expecting between the U.S. and China. Looking like a deal still set for tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely, though it's important to describe it really as a truce rather than a permanent agreement, because we know that many of the existing tariffs will remain in place for at least the foreseeable future. The U.S. Treasury Secretary and U.S. Trade Representative confirming that in a statement this Tuesday evening, saying that the tariffs will not be reduced for now, at least. Now, that deal will still be signed by the Chinese delegation who's arrived in Washington. They're putting the final touches on that phase one deal. A second deal is still to be negotiated in the coming months. The ceasefire was announced a month ago. The details have yet to be published in full. The U.S. says it will include a commitment to buy $200 billion worth more of American goods, especially agricultural produce. It's also understood to include some kind of provision to protect intellectual property rights and reduce tech transfers, although none of this has been confirmed by Beijing yet. While there is hope that the worst could be over, consumers and businesses in the U.S. have already paid a steep price in the tariff war. Kami Nedlik reports.
As the US-China trade war reaches a ceasefire, many Americans will be breathing a sigh of relief, none more so than soybean farmers. After China whacked tariffs on soybeans in response to US tariffs on Chinese goods, soybean exports fell from $12 billion in 2017 to just over $3 billion in 2018.
Resolving this trade war is definitely going to be a great step in the right direction. We knew as soon as the trade war escalated and the price of soybeans dropped so bad that we were in trouble.
The rest of the farming sector is in a similar state, despite an emergency package of $28 billion of government aid. Importers are also facing fallout as Chinese exporters failed to cut prices. Buyers had to absorb the cost or face passing it on to their consumers. This bike company used to depend on factories in China to make their bicycles. To escape the tariffs, it decided to relocate production to Taiwan. But it was a bumpy ride.
So when you're looking at a bike, there's so many different components. All of these small parts are produced by specialty manufacturers that specialize in a particular component or a particular set of components. So it's not as simple as just moving over and going to a one-stop shop. That doesn't exist.
Trade declined by over $100 billion since the start of the dispute. And though Trump has held off from imposing a new round of tariffs, the ones currently in place look set to remain. So the consequences of the trade war could drag on long after the deal is signed.
Well, investors around the world will be watching those trade developments closely. We saw Wall Street paring back its earlier gains, the Dow Jones dropping back from its new record high and that 29,000 mark. We saw shares of Delta Airlines up 3% on better than expected earnings. JP Morgan Chase shares rose about 1% after record-breaking fourth quarter profits. Earlier, the major European indices closed slightly higher after a rather choppy session. Shares of the London-listed Tullow Oil continued to fall, dropping 5% to the bottom of the European benchmark. Well, the world's biggest money manager says it's doubling down on the fight against climate change. BlackRock says that in the coming months, it will cut down its investments in companies that earn more than a quarter of their revenue from coal production. BlackRock manages some $7 trillion worth of assets, and environmental activists said they would wait to see action to back up that rhetoric. CEO Larry Fink writing in a blog post that he expects a, quote, fundamental reshaping of finance as corporations try to balance profits with their promises to go green. And he said that climate change is the top issue that his clients raise when they come to BlackRock. Well, climate will also be one of the hot topics at the World Economic Forum, which kicks off in Davos next week. The theme of this year's gathering is stakeholders for a cohesive and sustainable world. There'll be pressure on both business and political leaders to announce concrete climate commitments. WEF founder Klaus Schwab said he's encouraging the event's partners to go carbon neutral.
Environmental responsibility is very part of the stakeholder responsibility of business. The window is closing and the time which is available to act is becoming shorter and shorter.
The environmental activist Greta Thunberg will be one of the people attending Davos once again, along with the likes of Donald Trump, Angela Merkel, and Christine Lagarde. Iran's foreign minister has just recently announced that he won't be going, citing the backdrop of uncertainty in the Middle East. Still a pretty high-profile cast of characters there.
And always a lot of global leaders that just show up by surprise there sometimes as well. So it's
Sometimes as
still
well, some
possible.
unexpected arrivals
Right,
as well,
exactly.
absolutely.
France 24 will be covering all of the news from Davos as well. Thank you, Kate, for that update.